Well, mythological history tells us that King Arthur became king by coming upon a sword embedded in a rock. And many others tried to pull that sword out of the rock, and of course were not able to do it. But when he did, it came out of the rock with no problem. So he was elected king on that basis. So I thought we would take that little bit of history and make it a reality, sort of, in wood by using our scroll saw to cut out and symbolizing this event in so-called history. Well, what we're going to need, of course, is some plywood. I'm going to use these scraps of birch plywood, and we're going to need some glue, of course, and a few other odds and ends. As we go along, you'll get the idea. I've got this little pattern I made up of our rock and our sword, and we're going to have 2 copies of this pattern, because we're going to first of all cut out the shape of the rock itself in 3 layers, which we're going to join together to make our nice sturdy rock. And then we're going to cut out these other sections, sort of embellishments to the rock, out of a piece of plywood as well, and we're going to glue them on the front, make it look a little more rocky, so to speak. And we're going to use a little bit of shaping on the belt sander to make these look pretty good. The same with the sword. It's an easy cutout on the scroll saw. You should have no great difficulty. So let's begin work on this. Okay, the first thing we did is cut down those pieces of scrap wood to the size that we're going to need for the rock. I'm using 1/4-inch plywood, which is pretty good. We're going to take these together, and we're going to cut them all at once. We're going to cut the shape of the mountain around it. So what we want to do is take some painter's tape. Nothing fancy here. You can use regular masking tape if you prefer. And we'll tape these together. And you don't have to be really meticulous on this, just as long as it's holding them together. You could also alternately put some brads in the corner to keep them together. Or if you prefer using hot glue, you could do that as well. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Some of you probably have other methods to keep all your boards together. I like the tape. It's a simple method, and works fine for me. Okay, so we get all this taped up nicely. And what I like to do on the back, when I'm done taping, is to take a blade and just go along the edges of this, so that you nick that tape, and then you can just pull this tape right off. And the reason I'm doing this is that later on, when you're all done, and it's not so much for this project, but for other projects where you have some really fine cutting, it's always a job to take these pieces of tape off the back of the section that you cut out. If you cut as close to the edges as you can with this, you don't have to worry about removing it later on. You just have to worry about removing it from the front, which is what we're going to worry about at this point. Okay, now what we want to do next is to cut out our pattern. Take your scissors, and it doesn't have to be really fancy. Cut around the outer edges of it, like so. You cut the bottom off right along the line. Okay. And what we're going to do, we're going to glue this down right on the top there like that. And we'll be able to cut around it and get our general picture of our rock that we need. Okay, I'm going to put some what I use is the Staples glue stick. It's relatively inexpensive compared to some other glue sticks. Pick those up at Staples. They work pretty good. I'm not being paid by Staples to say this. I bought these myself, and I just use them on a regular basis. So I'm going to go glue this up right now. Okay, I put glue on the back of our little rock here. I'll put this down on the bottom of the board. Make sure it's securely down. Now this is just for the outline, so we're not going to need any entry holes or anything. We're just going to just do a straight cut right around the mountain. All three pieces at one time. We're going to get three little rocks here, which will end up gluing together eventually. Okay, so let's go to the scroll saw and do that now. Alright, we're at the scroll saw now, and we're going to do our cutting of the rock around the outer edges. And we're using a number 7 skip tooth blade, I believe. I think that's what I had in here last time. We'll fasten that down. My hand's going to be in the way a little bit here. Sorry for that, but got to be able to control this. I'll do my best to keep it out of the way. Okay, I'll lock this down, and we are ready to go. Okay, we have our mountain cut out here now. Let me just back off a little bit. And the great thing about cutting this, of course, is that you don't have to worry about being perfect on your cut. I mean, this is a rock, so the shape is going to be quite loose anyway. So we got our three pieces together now, and we're going to be gluing these together eventually after we get our detail done and a few other little steps that we're going to work on. The next thing we're going to do is set up our embellishments here, so we can cut those out of birch plywood, also again out of 1/4-inch stock. So let's go do that. Let's get that set up now. Okay, we only need one layer for the smaller pieces. So rather than waste another board, what I do is I took the cutoff that we had from the rock, and I just cut out those little pieces from the other sections we're going to need, and glued them down on this piece, and we'll cut them out of here. That way we'll save a little piece of wood, and we'll still end up with a good result. So what we're going to do is cut these out now. I'll probably use a smaller blade on this. I think I use a number 5 reverse tooth, and that's usually good enough. So I'll go cut these out, and I'll be back here. I won't bore you with cutting again. You know how this is all done. Just cut around the outer edges, and I should have all the pieces that I need to make our mountain work. Okay, I've cut all the little embellishment pieces out for the rock, and just sort of laid them down here on top of the rock with the paper on it, just to give you an idea of the placement of them. The first thing we want to do now is to go and take these pieces over to the little sanding wheel that I've got in my drill press and sand them down, but at the same time sort of round and shape them a little bit too, so that they'll look more like the contour of a stone rather than just a squared off piece of wood. So let's go over and do that now. We're over here at the sanding wheel. Now, this is a little sanding wheel that I picked up over at Ace Hardware. Again, this is not a commercial for them. You probably could find them in other places, but this has worked out pretty good for me, so this is what I use. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take the pieces that we cut out, and we're going to just gently run them over this thing as it's going, and round off the front surface of each section, not the back surface. The back surface will remain flat. So here we go. Okay, I did one of these just to looks. Let's see if this will come into focus properly. It rounds off the edges and corners so that they look pretty good. They look like they're actually parts of the rock that we're going to put together. And one of the benefits of this, of course, in doing this is that the plywood is layered and has different colors in between, so it tends to bring out some of the other colors in the area that you're scraping down. And this can be quite interesting in terms of building our rock as we go along here. So I'm going to do this to all of the pieces. I'm not going to bore you with this again. I'll get them all done. I'll bring them over to the bench. The back side remains flat, of course, because that's what we want to lay down on the rock and glue it down. So we'll do off the rest of these and get back to the bench again. Alright, I finished sanding all the little pieces there and rounded them over and made them look pretty good. Sort of an easy man's intarsia, so to speak. And now I've just sort of laid them out on the surface of that mountain. By the way, the surface of the mountain, the flat piece, I ran that under the sander too to give it some of that rough hewn look like the smaller pieces. And I used the pattern over here. I tore that off and laid it down and put the pattern down just so I can remember where these pieces go. What I have to do now is glue these down. And what I think I'll probably do is use a CA glue on them so I can speed this process up a little bit. Just lay them down accordingly and we'll finish off this front section. Now while the little pieces are drying on the front of the rock, I thought we would cut out the sword. Just cut the pattern out, very simple piece, and we're going to put some green tape on here again, of course, painter's tape. Glue this down, cut it out just like we did the mountain. Very simple cut. Might use a little entry hole here just to keep it stable in there while I'm cutting it. And then after, we're going to take this out and sort of round over the edges on this also to make it look pretty good as far as being a sword goes. Okay, so I'm going to go do that on the scroll saw now. Again, I'll do that off camera. Very simple work. Alright, I've cut the sword out now, and I've taken it and run it over the little sanding wheel to smooth over the edges. If you want to, you could make this a little more decorative. If you're good at painting, you might even want to do that too. You could do the whole assembly with painting. I want to leave mine in plain wood since I'm not such a great painter. But the next thing we want to do is to take our mountain, our little rock here, of course, and this is the midsection. Remember, there's three sections. There's the front, which we glued up all the pieces on. This is the midsection, and then there's a back section. And that's going to help us to keep the sword nice and secure in there. So what we want to do is we want to decide where it is we're going to put our sword on this mountain. And I'm going to just sort of eyeball this. I'm going to have it come down like that so that it juts up out of the top, maybe a little bit higher. So what we want to do right now is to take this sword and place it where we want it, approximately or completely. We don't need to go down too far, just enough to hold it in place. And we're going to take our pencil, go around the outside of the blade at the tip here, trying not to move it. And that's where our sword is going to slide in between our rock crevices, so to speak. Now what we want to do is take this to the scroll saw and cut that piece out. Well, I hadn't thought this through very carefully, evidently. I found that when I got this piece cut out and I dropped it in like that, it works fine. But we're going to want it to just slide right in from the top, and we can see right now that we're going to have a problem with that. So what we're going to have to do is cut off a little bit on each side. Doesn't have to be a lot, but enough so that that can cut through there without any difficulty and get right down into the area where it'll just slide right in there. So we're going to do that. We're not going to take off too much. I'll do this on the scroll saw. Okay, I just took a little bit off. I didn't even go to the lines that I drew there. And it looks like that's going to be enough so we can slide it right in there and not have any difficulties. We're going to, I can show you this probably back off here a little bit. And what we're going to be doing is gluing these together. This goes on the top. This is going to go in the back. And our sword, of course, is going to be able to insert in the front. So that we have our final project, which will look something like that. Hopefully it'll look a little better than that when we're done. But that gives you the idea of how we're going to set this up. You could also avoid that problem, I suppose, by making it just a straight edge sword. Instead of going for the peak down there, just go straight down, put your very fine point at the bottom. But we've got this so far, so we're going to stay with it and see what we can come up with. Alright, I took some CA glue and put it on the back of the part we cut out, and then took the back panel and glued it on there. And I've got it under a little pressure from the clamps now, so it'll hold it nice and flat. And we'll wait for that to dry, and then we'll do the same thing with the front piece to get our little rock all finished up here. Alright, I finished up the mountain, or I keep calling it a mountain. I finished up the rock, and this is what it looks like when it's all assembled. It's basically a two-dimensional item, but you can place it down on a surface, and it looks a little bit three-dimensional when you look at it from the front. Now what I'm going to do is go around the edges here to smooth out some of this part here. I'm going to do that on my sand flea. Okay, sand flea does a pretty good job of smoothing everything out, making it nice and even. And we'll just set this up now. I'm thinking maybe of putting something like a base on the bottom eventually, but right now we'll leave it as it is, and we'll take a look at the finished product. I think we probably should put some sealer on here too before we take a look at the final outcome.